Chag Pesach Sameach and Shabbat Shalom. 4,000 years ago, our people left the bondage of Egypt. After the long night of servitude and misery, we were free. Well, almost. However, the road to becoming a free people in our own land was to be a circuitous one. It was a road that would test our faith and resolve and our willingness to follow God. And it would test our God's patience over and over again. Hashem, for reasons which are clearly given in the Torah, but only in retrospect, did not arrange for us to follow the shortest possible route. Something like some of the sat-navs I've known of. Why is that? Why not take the route that would have gotten us there in a few weeks, straight across? The least traveling time, the promised land within weeks of our liberation from Egypt. Instead, God chose to take us by an extremely indirect route, which eventually led through the wilderness. As it was, our encampment beside the sea and our subsequent journey through the dry seabed could actually have been avoided. There was a strip of land we could have crossed without going anywhere near the actual sea. But you see, this was also part of God's plan. And when we look at our own lives, perhaps we can look back and see similar sorts of events, which may have been confusing at the time, but in retrospect, we understand why God allowed the things that he did and why he led us in the way that he did. Naturally, Pharaoh had his scouts observing us from the time we left, of course. And they thought they detected weakness. We looked lost. Well, with the exception of Moshe, no one had actually been there before. But after all, we had been their slaves for hundreds of years. They really thought very little of us. Pharaoh calculated that we were easy prey for his powerful army of chariots, of which he was very proud. His desire was for revenge and, of course, to reclaim his slaves, killing some of us in the process for the plagues inflicted on him and his people. He would show us, and he would show our God, who is truly sovereign. Having learned nothing from the plagues, he was anxious to take revenge upon those responsible for devastating his nation. He was still sure of himself, and he wanted to prove himself the master. He needed to do that, not only to his people, but to our people. So he sent his army after us. When we saw the Egyptians approaching, we were utterly terrified. We forgot everything that God had already done for us. There we were, between Pharaoh and the sea. What could we do? To whom could we turn for help? What would become of us? Fast forward to 2026. Today, our enemies are still breathing down our necks. This time it's Iran's turn to wage war against us. Consider what you've read or heard about Israel in the last 6 months, or even in the last 6 days. Because Israel is, as usual, being hauled up before the court of public opinion for yet another attack on peace-loving Muslims. While we are still being castigated for our war on the poor Palestinians of Gaza, forgetting that they attacked us, and remembering that they are a non-existent people group made up of Arabs from around the Middle East who actually mock those who support them. Apparently, in this day and age, only Donald Trump wants to be seen as Israel's friend. Certainly the oil-focused European nations, including the UK, want nothing to do with this war and nothing to do with Israel. And we see anti-Semitism continuing to grow in Europe, in the US, and around the world. In the UK, hatred of Jews is at an all-time high. Many of us are afraid to even walk around in our neighborhoods, fearing what might happen after the attacks that we've seen. Well, back to our dilemma by the sea. Faced with annihilation or return to slavery, our people were in a panic. And then Moshe spoke these powerful words, powerful today too. Do not be afraid. Stand still. Stop running around in circles and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Wow. We were being told we didn't have to do anything. Everything was being done for us. And we should remember all these years later that the same God who spilt the blood of the Egyptians, who split the sea so that we could walk through on dry land, that same God, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, the God of Israel, defends Israel today. And he is with each of us, even through these difficult times, even as we continue the festival of Pesach 2026. Well, on the one hand, we know that Pesach requires early and lengthy preparations to be made in all observant Jewish homes. When God commanded us to rid our homes of chametz, he knew we would have to apply ourselves. He knew that his requirements would only be kept by those who sincerely desired to please him and walk in covenant with him. But it's not only physical preparedness that is required of us. Clearly, we've each had to make spiritual preparations as well. For us, the physical and the spiritual are always closely linked, as God's requirements connect the two in so many different ways. This is especially true with Shabbat and our festivals and holy days. Spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, and material well-being. This is what we seek for ourselves and for others. But the spiritual always comes first. At Pesach, we celebrate the liberation of our people from Egyptian slavery, as well as liberation from and rejection of Egyptian paganism and the way of life of the Olam Hazeh, that is the world we live in, the abominations of Egypt and of the modern world as well. We celebrate physical liberation and spiritual freedom, and we know that the two must work in tandem. Real freedom is impossible unless one personally receives the precepts of the Torah and seeks to act upon them as the guide to our daily activities. This is halakha. Only a redeemed, pure, and holy life leads to real freedom. We say of Pesach, in every generation, each Jew should see himself as though he has personally been liberated from Egypt. At Pesach each year, a timely lesson and message for every individual Jew of whatever age or background is presented. The narrative of Pesach is the account of God's intervention in the lives of our people, not only then, but through the ages and today. We know what is happening in the outside world, but it should not sway us, because we continue to experience God's emancipation. We are liberated from the contingencies of the world's agenda, even if we are still subject to the conditions of the Olam Hazeh. The lessons of Pesach are emphasized by the three principal symbols of the Seder, concerning which our sages have said that unless we explain their significance and make them central to our celebration, we have not observed the Seder appropriately. And these are, of course, the Pesach lamb, the unleavened bread, and the bitter herbs. We avoid bitterness in our lives only through the application of the Pesach lamb. As catastrophe falls upon our enemies, we are driven to remove ourselves from a place of darkness to a place of redemption and holiness, consecration and shalom under God's care. The festival of freedom must always be connected with the commandment, "You shall tell your children." Our home and the celebrations there are basic to our peoplehood, to our identity. The Jewish home, we're told, is the foundation for the next generation, the wise and the wicked, a temporary state, hopefully, the simple, and the one who doesn't know what to ask. We must be faithful to our responsibility to our children, as well as to those taking their first steps into Judaism and into B'nai Maccabim. It is our duty as well as our privilege to live out Torah until we see next year in Jerusalem become a reality. On the other hand, every year at Pesach, there's another miracle. Did you miss it? On the 1st of April, 2026, something truly miraculous happened. What was this miraculous event, you ask? It was this. The majority of Jews all around the world took part in a Seder, celebrating Passover with mishpucha and friends, including religious Jews, secular Jews, liberal, progressive, reform, conservative, Orthodox, and Hasidic Jews. Jews who are in shul every week, and Jews who never go to shul. Jews who don't believe in God or in chosenness. For one night, most of us Jews recalled our people's exodus from Egypt, even if we believe it to be a myth. Why is that? What is the real message of Passover? What makes it so compelling for all Jews? Think about the deeper message of Pesach. It has become popular in our world for most of our people to say that the message of Pesach is freedom. We were slaves, now we're free. Surely a message for all people everywhere, a universal message. But if that's all there is to it, Passover would have ceased to be a significant holiday and would have become more like Purim or Hanukkah, a celebration of victory thousands of years ago, even if some do think it's a myth. But Pesach is much more than that. It's about faith. It's about our fundamental beliefs and about our identity as Jews. Something essential for those who are committed to becoming Jews or being Jews. As I've already quoted from the Mishnah, each generation is obligated to view ourselves personally as having been redeemed from the slavery of Egypt. We are commanded to repeat the narrative of the first Pesach as if it were our own. Why is that? Well, Pesach connects us with Hashem. Even those of us who say we don't believe in God, as we recite, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt in order to be your God. Redemption from Egypt was purposeful. We were not delivered from the oppression of Egypt so that we could be free to do whatever we wanted, to live as we like. We were redeemed and liberated so that we would choose to serve our God, to follow his commandments, and to live as his chosen people. And so Pesach is about emunah. It's about faith. The most effective path towards faith is by way of direct personal experience. Having friends and family in Israel, and of course always making new friends. The importance and centrality of Israel to our national identity is incomparably greater than it might have been if we only read about Israel. Hopefully most of us have had the opportunity to be there, because no book could bring me personally to the same level of understanding as the experience of sitting in the home of my father's cousin who survived the Shoah. If you haven't been to Israel, I would say that when it's possible, of course, you must go. You must go to confirm your personal commitment to the land that God has given to us and to our people forever. Israel is our land, our heritage, our future. Wherever we live right now, that's where we're going. In the same way, it's important that our seders be brought to life by making them personal to each one of us. I have attended seders recited by heart in Hebrew, where no one fully comprehended what was being said, including the speaker. This sort of experience does little to make a personal connection possible. Likewise with seders at which motivation to read through the Haggadah or, at sort of record speed seemed dominated by hunger, having had a peek at the brisket in the kitchen. Although pleasant enough family gatherings with great food, these experiences do little to connect those present with genuine faith. Pesach is about identity, peoplehood, and our covenant with God. Celebrating Passover strengthens our Jewish identity, our relationship with the God who created us as a people from Abraham and Sarah, Yitzhak and Rivka, Yisrael, Rachel, and Leah. We recite, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, instead of I am the Lord your God who created you. But both statements are true, and they're in our minds. Pesach and the Exodus narrative is strategic to our faith because we are celebrating the establishment of the nation of Israel, not in 1948 when we left Egypt. We are the only people created and set aside by covenant with the one and only true God. Before the Exodus and the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, the nation of Israel did not exist. We were the 12 tribes descended from the 12 sons of Yisrael. Not until we left Egypt and received the Torah did we become the unique people of God's creation and choosing, created for His purpose. Thus, Passover is a celebration of peoplehood and of our unique relationship with God. This, no doubt, was part of God's intention when He made Pesach the first holy day after Shabbat, such an important festival. And we're reminded of this fact throughout the year, every time we speak of our liberation from Egypt, which is often. One of the most common reoccurring phrases in Torah is, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. We celebrate our uniqueness. Yes, we have been strangers in many places, not just Egypt. We've experienced the consequences of seeming strange to others wherever we've been. In fact, God never intended us to be comfortable anywhere but in our own land, the land He gave to our fathers and mothers and to us. But the narrative itself carries a universal message as we're admonished concerning sojourners, those who live among us, those who are becoming part of us through conversion. We are told to treat them well based in our own experience as sojourners in Egypt. This requires, kindness. It requires that we treat them as we would choose to be treated, to welcome them who are other, to become part of us, acknowledging our God as their God, and the covenant relationship with God as applicable to them. Likewise, as we were slaves in Egypt, abused, mistreated, poor, and hated, so we as a people and as individuals are to show concern for those in similar circumstances. 36 times we are reminded that we were slaves in Egypt. This is why Jews have tended to be at the forefront of such movements as civil rights in the U.S., walking with Martin Luther King, and in South Africa as well. Freedom. I've already mentioned that freedom in the Pesach narrative is not simply a freedom from oppression, freedom from living in fear. But more than that, it's a freedom to serve God and his purposes. Most of us, when we say freedom, think of freedom from being told what to do, freedom to go where you choose, to do what you like, and even freedom to live where you want to live. This kind of freedom is associated with hedonism, immortalized by Janis Joplin in the song Bobby McGee. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. How sad. This sort of freedom is empty, it's purposeless, mindless, and it wears thin rather quickly. We should remember that after the miracle at the sea and our escape, the first thing we did was to complain about the terrible living conditions in the desert. Imagine that. And begging to go back to Egypt. But freedom from is a necessary precondition for freedom to. We had to be liberated from the demands of pagan Egypt, physical and spiritual, in order to be free to serve God. As you and I remember the Exodus and the narrative of Pesach, we need to be free from whatever our Egypt is, our evil inclination, the influences of the world around us, our own desires and proclivities, in order to be able to serve God. As long as making money, advancing our careers, or having a good time is on our agenda ahead of taking time with God, taking time to come to synagogue regularly, taking time for what you undoubtedly claim as more important. If you put any of those things first, you are a slave. The handcuffs, they may be golden and lined in velvet, or they may be steel. They may even seem pleasant, but you are not free. In Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the fathers, we read, "Who is wise?" The answer, the one who is content with his lot. When we have achieved the essentials of freedom from, then, and only then, are we ready to proceed with freedom to. Only at this stage do we have true freedom, the discernment and the capacity to begin to serve God fully by keeping his mitzvot, following his halakha, living in the way that was modeled by Rav Yeshua, our Pesach lamb. At the end of the week, as we continue to count the Omer, leaving Pesach behind and moving toward Shavuot, we will certainly find many opportunities to serve Hashem. As you think about this year's Seder and Passover week, remember that this holiday is not just about celebrating freedom from enslavement. Focus on why God wanted us to be free, why he released us from Egyptian slavery. Concentrate on how you are going to use the freedom God has given you to celebrate and advance your deepening and expanding relationship with him. I wish you a good rest of Pesach and counting of the Omer. God bless and keep you. Shabbat Shalom.